Hey everyone, welcome to Atomo. Andrew here. It's Monday, November 21st, and I'm going to talk about pipelines. I'm battling a cold here, so yeah, I'm getting over it. Uh, but let's move on anyhow. So in a previous video, I talked about the Nord Stream pipelines coming offline, blown up, kaboom, or at least I think Putin said one of the pipelines was still open after they've checked it out. Overall, Nord Stream is 110 billion cubic meters per year. So that's a significant amount of energy. And what Zoltan Pozar of Credit Suisse talked about was 20 billion euros in gas going into Germany results in about $2 trillion in uplift in industrial capacity. So, given that the conduits, primarily from Russia into Europe, are being closed down, there's nothing of the same magnitude able to push that amount of product into Europe. So we have to look at if Europe's going to make up for it, and if people freeze enough or complain enough that they want to get cheap energy back. Green energy sources don't really make up for the density of energy that's being taken offline. Green to get up to that point would take decades to do it properly, not to just cram it through. So, what does that leave us with? So let's take a look. I just have Google Maps up here and just looking. Well, what else do we have open and available? The biggest friendly on the board right now for taking over. So if Russian gas were to come into Germany and Germany was able to resell it, then Germany would take this prize place of being the energy provider within Europe. Well, due to so many political agendas in play, and let's say the Davos crowd doesn't want green energy because they want to capitulate Europe into one very, very solid unified government. So in order to do that, you have to basically eradicate the middle class. And after you're able to do that, then through the chaos that ensues, you re-architect into the new order that you want to have. Now, that's not going to go over well with a lot of people. Little people like you and I, we want to have cheap energy. It makes heating better, especially for us in northern countries. We want that as cheap as possible. Want to be able to drive our cars as cheap as possible, or at least not get to the point where even electric vehicles are going to be prohibitively hard to recharge because energy prices have skyrocketed so much. So, what is the architecture that is going to emerge? So, we have to I want to look at Turkey a bit here. Turkey is in kind of an enviable position right now on the geopolitical game board, especially when it comes to energy transit. Turkey has, if you look from uh, east of Turkey going west, you have Azerbaijan and the energy within Azerbaijan, which can transit through Georgia, but you can't quite go through Armenia. There's been conflict in those areas. So you have one potential project here. Let's see. I'm just looking through all. You have SCP routing through Georgia that goes through TANAP that then connects into tap. Okay, these are specific energy conduits. I'm giving you the name so you can look these up. I just don't have the cute tools to pull maps up onto this. I'll figure that out at some point. Okay, so you have that as a potential for bringing energy into and routing through Turkey. If you don't want to use Turkey, then there's a project that was being talked about called East Med. East Med was looking to bring gas from the oil fields around Israel, routing through Cyprus, routing through Crete, routing through Greece, then jumping through something called Greece to Italy Poseidon pipeline, going into the heel of the boot of Italy in the Puglia area. Pardon my pronunciations if they're not correct. Okay, so that gives you another conduit to bring energy in. Well, that's come into all kinds of disrepute because, well, most of the players said, well, we want to have green energy coming in. We're not going to, especially if the US and being a part of the Davos crew, do not want to have more fossil fuel energy pumping into Europe. The gas fields from Israel was only going to be in the amount of 10 billion cubic meters per year. So we're nowhere even close to Nord Stream capacities, but this is where you need multiple different capacities or transits coming in to make up for that. You jump over to Northern Africa and you have energy through Algeria and Libya. And this was a big part where Italy is a little ticked off now because back in the Gaddafi era of Libya, there was talks to bring energy transits through Libya up through, let's go back to my Google map here. We're going to route it through the, what's that little island off the boot of Catania area. Pardon my not having the geography here done well, but there is that transit point where Tripoli can run it off into the island off the boot of Italy, then up and transit in through Italy. It also gives you Tunisia as well as a possibility, especially routing Algeria energy up into that zone as well. So you have these multiple pipelines that are coming in. The key routing point, though, is Italy in all of this. Italy has just changed their government, and as we're hearing from Maloney, she's starting to play a bit of hardball. And we're not sure how that architecture is going to come into play. Part of the hardball is she's called out Macron in France with now she's unveiled that, well, France has a certain type of franc that they use in parts of Africa. So in like the Faso area, for example, where they may be mining gold and then converting that into these kind of colonial francs. I'm going to use that word here because it's kind of what it is. And then paying out for that. So Africa gets fiat for resources. So we basically get pieces of paper from France in trade for these resources. Of course, being a currency, currencies can be exchanged, but it doesn't appear that Africa is getting the good part of this bargain. Now, this is where this energy architecture comes into play. As some of these resources can appropriately, and this is what Gaddafi was talking about, and this is not a Gaddafi support thing. This is just, I do talk to Nigerians. I work with Nigerians. And when I bring up this topic, they don't like to talk about this. I'm in Canada. and most of Nigerians don't like to talk about this in Canada, is I say, well, Gaddafi was talking about bringing in a gold-based dinar, and next thing you know, they just light up. It's like, yeah, that was going to be something that was hopefully to uplift Africa. And I got this on good standing as I talk to a lot of the Nigerian folk that come in, and I start talking about this stuff, and they're surprised when I start talking to them about it. They don't expect anybody here in the West to understand all these intricacies within Africa. There's a lot at stake in Africa, and of course that's the part of the miracle that we want, especially for people in Africa, is to be able to develop the resources and develop, like, instead of bringing immigrants and moving them to other parts of the world. The hypothesis here is there's enough in Africa to support Africans, more than enough, probably to the envy of Europe and a lot of even the collective West. But one of the problems with development in Africa are it's not colonialism. That's not the big thing. When I talk to people from Africa, it's basically massive rules, regulations, taxation. So if you want to get anything done and there's a regulatory hurdle that you have to jump over, usually that's going to cost money above and beyond what it costs to actually. So if it cost you just say equivalent of 50 euros to start a business in a country in Africa, it might be 5,000 on top of that to get the appointment to talk to the people who can open you a business, and so on and so forth. Okay. There is energy there. There is energy that can move into Europe. There is energy that Europeans can use to industrialize and to sell goods, potentially to create, okay, Africa, provide us with some energy. We'll provide you with manufactured goods and help you build up your economies with through industrialization and building up of infrastructure so that people in Africa can self-determine better than what's happening now. Okay, so I don't make these remarks in any way disparagingly. I really would like to see projects within Africa really take off so that there's good competition within the world. And that's one of the things the collective West sometimes doesn't like, even though they talk about democracy and capitalism, is good, healthy competition. That's what keeps you moving forward. That brings us, we got gas transits coming through Turkey. We got potential if Israel doesn't come into play, the infrastructure to move gas between Cyprus, Crete, through Greece, or transiting directly into Italy is a possibility. But with Israel out of the question, well, who does that leave us with? Well, that leaves us with Turkey and going through potentially the Turkish area of Cyprus, a route energy. Turkey needs to get energy from someplace. Well, that brings us to the areas around Syria, but also if we want to look at the darker and blacker stuff, we do have oil coming out of Iraq. So what is happening in that part of the world right now? We're noticing that now that Saudi Arabia is potentially pivoting towards BRICS, and just do some searches on this, you'll hear about that conversation happening. So if Saudi Arabia is pivoting towards BRICS, what that means is potentially, does that mean that Israel will back out? Don't know exactly sure yet. Iraq has, in the northern part of Iraq, disruptions. That pulls Iran, that pulls Turkey, that pulls Syria into play, into that area of northern Iraq. So if I take my fist here, that's northern Iraq. On one side, you got Syria. If I'm putting the Mediterranean here, it might be reversed because camera and all that. Turkey, that's above it. Iran, that's over here. Okay. Pardon me. Okay. There was an incident within Istanbul where there was a bombing Turkey is blaming Kurdistan. What is unique about northern Iraq? Northern Iraq has the Kurdish territories. It also had the former ISIS zones around that area. So there's been a lot of fighting, a lot of instability in the area. What is important about Iraq and potentially the northern parts of Iran is if we want to get Qatari gas from the Persian Gulf up into Turkey to hit the transits. So this is a play. If we think about it, okay, who wants to make some money here? If Saudi Arabia is pivoting to BRICS and Qatar is still wanting to get into the game, well, you have a potential to route through Iraq into the northern part of Iraq or to transit through Syria. That means kind of taking low road through Iraq, which maybe a bit, and taking low road through Iraq, coming out through Syria, but also you have the oil fields around the Kirkuk area. Problem with the Kirkuk area is that, and I'm not calling the Kurdistan people a problem, the way I'm phrasing problem here is if we want to have free flow of energy, we need to have a political landscape that basically allows the flow of energy, and that does require basically peacetime operations. Or if it's not peacetime, then there's enough security for the energy transit, and as you add security to energy transit, you increase the price, perhaps making the project not viable for the potential end customers, unless, overall oil production is reduced to the point where prices and commodity prices rise to make these projects a little more palatable to the investors. But investing in a tumultuous area is a potential problem. So who is going to control this area? So now we got security concerns, and we have Iran stating that they're going to start to mobilize their security forces. Turkey is already in that stage. What I'm looking for here is the Turkish yes, Kirkuk oil fields are very important. So just a little bit on that. It's about, they're saying 1 million barrels per day could potentially come out of the Kirkuk area. I believe Kirkuk has about 9 billion barrels of recoverable oil. That's not insignificant. That's a pretty big chunk of oil coming out of that area. So just do a search for the oil field maps of that area. I just wanted to flip through some of these things. Yes, there it is. Operation Claw Sword. So we're starting operation. So I'm going to quote from, it looks like Reuters, sorry. We're starting Operation Sword Claw from now on, Defense Minister Hussein Akar said before the planes left their bases to hit targets. A Defense Ministry statement said he directed the offensive from Air Force Operations Center with top commanders. So they're doing targeted strikes against bases of what they call, and now this is coming from a Turkish standpoint, they're calling the outlawed Kurdistan's Working Party and the Kurdish People's Protection Units. So what we're looking at is, and then this is where I'm trying to sort out now, is it that Turkey wants to clear the area and to get energy flows coming through? If Turkey can control the energy flows from northern Iraq, and if northern Iraq loses the the security architecture of their northern area, then it's potential that we might have some claims being made to northern Iraq. Now, this is very speculative, but if claims are going to be made, it's potentially who's going to control the security architecture. It doesn't seem that with the exit of the US military from the area, and you also have to note that the strategic petroleum reserves in the USA are being drained. Strategic petroleum reserves were there kept for potentially if the US has to use their military arm significantly, then they need those reserves topped up in the case that, if they want to support the security architecture in northern Iraq, for example, if Iran's saying, there's a lot of talk about regime change in Iran right now, they may be at a point where they want to do some show of force. I haven't quite myself, and I'm looking for information on this, whether Iran wants to flip the security architecture within northern Iraq. So I talked in a previous video about a game board, the game of Go, and picking up potential territories and holding those territories. What we're seeing now is an escalation in the play of the northern Iraq territory. Lots of oil up for grabs. Europe is going to be crying for it. There's a shift away from Russian oil, and perhaps taking this game piece that's northern Iraq and somebody holding it before it moves into the BRICS architecture. The moment it moves into BRICS, then it's basically a part of the Russian China conglomerate. And so then that may not be completely open to Turkey, but Turkey's an odd player. Turkey will play for Russia, then Turkey will play for Europe. Turkey tends to play for Turkey. And one of the things that Turkey would like to have is access to the transits of this energy. That means they can add their fees to it. And the more pipelines you have transiting through Turkey, comes back to what I was starting this video about. Turkey becomes a very strategic player. If they got all the pipelines transiting through them, and Ukraine no longer has pipelines transiting through it, then 10% for the big guy goes to Erdogan and no longer to the Biden. So, not that that's what the thing is that they're trying to do. This is very important developments that are coming into play. Just bringing this forward to give you some context on some of the potential more geopolitical hurdles that are coming forward as we start closing out 2022, and we're getting ready for a very not so auspicious 2023.